Claire woke up at exactly 5 in the morning, just like every other day. Her eyes opened without the need for an alarm. Her body knew the routine. She sat up in her small room and looked around at the bare walls. There was a bed, a small desk, and a closet. Nothing else. She did not need anything else. She dressed in her standard gray uniform and tied her dark hair back. In the mirror, she saw a face that looked human. She had heard about humans from the files she organized for Administrator Kelthros. Earth was far away, a planet full of wild humans who refused to cooperate with the consortium. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable. That was why the scientists had created her. A better version. A version that could be trusted. Claire left her quarters and walked through the long corridors of Station Theta 9. The station was enormous, a massive structure floating in space. It housed thousands of beings. Most were servants like her, created or bred to serve the consortium. She passed others in the hallway, a tall reptilian creature pushing a cart of supplies, a small insect-like being cleaning the floors. None of them looked at each other. They just moved through their tasks silently. She arrived at Administrator Kelthros's residence on the upper levels. The doors opened automatically when they sensed her presence. Inside, the rooms were decorated with expensive items from different worlds. Paintings, sculptures, strange objects that glowed softly. Claire began her work. She prepared breakfast, organized documents, and checked the schedule for the day. Kelthros appeared an hour later. He was a Vryn, one of the ruling species in the consortium. His skin was pale blue and his eyes were large and dark. He looked at Claire the way someone might look at a piece of furniture. Useful, but not important. "Good morning," he said without warmth. Claire nodded and served his meal. She stood nearby while he ate, ready to respond if he needed anything. He reviewed reports on his tablet, occasionally making comments about station business. She listened but did not speak unless spoken to. That was the proper way. After breakfast, Kelthros went to his study. Claire followed to organize his workspace. While he attended a video conference, she sorted through papers and files. That was when she saw it. A folder marked with red symbols indicating restricted information. It was slightly open, revealing images inside. Claire should have closed it and moved on. She should not have been curious. But something made her look. The images showed a blue and green planet. Earth. She saw cities with tall buildings reaching toward the sky, forests that stretched for miles, oceans that seemed endless. And humans. So many humans. Walking, laughing, living their lives freely. She stared at the images for a long moment. These people looked like her, but they were different. They moved differently with confidence and purpose that seemed to come from within, rather than from orders. Something stirred inside her chest, an unfamiliar feeling she could not name. Claire quickly closed the folder and stepped back. Kelthros had not noticed. He was still focused on his conference. She finished her tasks and left the study, but the images stayed in her mind. For the rest of the day, as she completed her duties, she kept thinking about those humans on Earth. That evening, after Kelthros dismissed her, Claire did something she had never done before. Instead of returning directly to her quarters, she took a different route. She went down to the lower levels of the station, where the maintenance systems ran and where most servants lived. The lower levels were darker and less clean than the upper areas. Pipes ran along the ceilings. The air smelled of metal and oil. Claire walked through the corridors, watching the other servants. They moved slowly after their long shifts, heading to their small rooms to rest before starting again tomorrow. She saw a group gathered near a water station. They were speaking in low voices. As she approached, they fell silent and looked at her nervously. Claire recognized one of them, a reptilian named Kryn who worked in cargo handling. "Are you lost?" Kryn asked carefully. His voice was rough but not unkind. Claire shook her head. She was not sure why she had come down here. She was not sure what she was looking for. "I wanted to see," she said quietly. The others exchanged glances. One of them, an insect-like creature, clicked its mandibles nervously. They seemed afraid that Claire might report them for gathering. "See what?" Kryn asked. Claire struggled to put it into words. She wanted to see how others lived. She wanted to know if they felt the same strange things she was beginning to feel, but she could not say that. It sounded wrong, dangerous. "Just walking," she finally said. Kryn studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. He gestured for her to join them. Claire hesitated, then stepped closer. The group relaxed slightly. They talked about small things. The work they did, the problems with equipment, the food in the dining hall. But underneath the ordinary conversation, Claire sensed something else. A shared understanding that none of them spoke aloud. They were all aware of what they were. They were all aware that their lives were not their own. The insect creature, whose name was Vess, mentioned that 3 workers had been taken away yesterday. Equipment failure in one of the air recycling units, Vess said softly. They blamed the maintenance crew. The words hung in the air. Taken away meant executed. Everyone knew it, but no one said it directly. Claire felt that strange feeling in her chest again, stronger this time. It felt like anger, though she was not sure she had ever felt anger before. Those workers had probably done nothing wrong. But the consortium needed someone to blame, so servants died. She stayed with the group for another hour, then returned to her quarters. That night, lying in her bed, Claire could not sleep. Her mind kept returning to the images of Earth, those free humans, and then to the executed workers, and then to her own face in the mirror. She looked human, but she had been created in a laboratory, designed to serve, designed to obey. But if she had been designed to never question, why was she questioning now? If she had been created to be content with her role, why did she feel this growing dissatisfaction? Something had gone wrong with their design, or perhaps something had gone right. Over the next few weeks, Claire continued her duties perfectly. Kelthros never suspected anything was different, but she began to pay attention to things she had previously ignored. She noticed how the overseers spoke to servants with contempt and casual cruelty. She noticed how the station worked, how every system depended on servant labor. She noticed the locked doors in certain sections, the areas where servants were not allowed. She also returned to the lower levels whenever she could, meeting with Kryn and Vess and others. They never spoke directly about rebellion or freedom. Such words were too dangerous. But they shared information. Vess knew about the computer systems. Kryn knew about the cargo bays and supply routes. Claire knew about the administrator's schedules and security protocols. Then came the day that changed everything. Claire was in Kelthros's study, accessing his computer to update his calendar. A message notification appeared. It was marked urgent and classified. She knew she should not open it, but her hand moved to the screen before she could stop herself. The message was from the Genetic Research Division. It discussed the servant program. The scientists were developing new modifications that would make servants even more compliant. They planned to phase out the current generation, including Claire and others like her. The new servants would be better, meaning more completely controlled. Claire closed the message and stepped back from the computer. Her hands were shaking. Phase out meant disposal. They were going to kill her and replace her with an improved model. All the servants would eventually be replaced. They were already obsolete. That night she met with Kryn and Vess in their usual spot. She told them what she had learned. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Kryn said something that made Claire's decision clear. If we are going to die anyway, should we not choose how? Claire looked at the others. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. Hope. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change their fate. She thought about the humans on Earth living freely under their blue sky. She thought about what it might feel like to make her own choices, to live for herself rather than for someone else's convenience. Yes, Claire said quietly. We should choose, and I choose to fight. The decision to fight was easier than the actual fighting. Claire and her small group met in secret over the following weeks, trying to plan something that seemed impossible. They were servants created to obey. How could they possibly rebel against the entire consortium? Claire discovered that thinking about rebellion made her feel physically ill. Her stomach would tighten and her head would ache. Patricia, another human who worked in the medical center, explained it to them during one of their meetings. The scientists had built controls into their bodies. When they thought about disobeying, their own biology fought against them. But we are thinking about it anyway, Patricia said with a strange smile. That means something is breaking. We just need to push through the discomfort. She had been studying the medical files, learning about what had been done to them. The genetic modifications were strong but not perfect. Consciousness was harder to control than the scientists had believed. Their group grew slowly. Harlan joined them, a human who worked in the food preparation areas. He was angry in a way that Claire was learning to understand. Anger at being created as property. Anger at being expected to be grateful for existence. His anger was useful because it cut through the conditioning faster than careful thought. Greg came next, pulled from the waste management systems. He knew the hidden passages and maintenance tunnels better than anyone. The station was huge, and there were spaces that the overseers never visited. These became their meeting places, their planning rooms, their first small taste of freedom. They started small. Vess showed them how to send coded messages through the work order system. A request for supplies in a certain section meant a meeting was scheduled. A maintenance report with specific words meant danger, abort, stay away. They built a language that the overseers could not understand, hidden in plain sight. Claire continued her work for Administrator Kelthros, playing the role of the perfect servant. It was harder now, knowing what she knew. Every time he gave her an order, she had to consciously choose to obey it. She told herself it was temporary, that she was gathering information. But some nights she wondered if she was just a coward, too afraid to act. Then Vess disappeared. One day the insect-like being simply did not show up to their meeting. Claire and Kryn searched carefully, asking questions without seeming too interested. They learned that maintenance workers had been reporting unusual behavior. Security had conducted random inspections. Vess had been taken to the research level for evaluation. The research level was where servants were created and modified. It was where problems were fixed. Vess would be examined, and the scientists would discover the behavioral changes. They would see that Vess was developing independence, and then they would either reprogram or terminate. The group met in an emergency session in a forgotten storage room. Harlan argued that they should stay hidden, that Vess was already lost. Saving one servant was not worth exposing the entire resistance. Others agreed nervously. They were not ready for direct action. They had no weapons, no real plan. Claire listened to the arguments, feeling that physical sickness again. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to protect herself. But she thought about Vess, strapped to a table in the research level, being taken apart to see what had gone wrong. She thought about the humans on Earth who would never abandon their own. And she realized that if they abandoned Vess now, they did not deserve the freedom they sought. "We get Vess back," Claire said firmly. The others stared at her. Harlan shook his head, but Claire continued. "If we cannot save one of our own, what are we doing this for? We either matter or we do not." "Vess matters," Kryn clicked his agreement. Patricia nodded slowly. Even Harlan, still doubtful, admitted she was right. They spent the next 2 days planning their first real operation. It had to be fast and it had to be clean. They could not let the consortium know there was an organized resistance. Patricia created the diversion. She triggered a medical emergency in her section, claiming multiple servants had become ill from contaminated food. It was believable enough that security had to respond. Greg flooded a key corridor by sabotaging the waste systems, creating chaos and drawing more personnel away from the research level. Claire used Kelthros's access codes, which she had memorized weeks ago. She walked into the research level like she belonged there, carrying a data pad and wearing the calm expression of someone on official business. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest, but her face showed nothing. The research level was cold and white and sterile. Claire passed laboratories where scientists worked on genetic sequences. She passed storage rooms full of equipment she did not recognize, and then she found the examination rooms. Through a window, she saw Vess strapped to a table, unconscious but alive. But Vess was not alone. The room held 12 other beings, all servants, all in various stages of examination or modification. Some were awake, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Others were unconscious like Vess. Claire understood with sudden horror that this was not just about fixing Vess. This was routine. This was what happened to servants who showed signs of independence. She had come to rescue one friend. She was looking at a dozen prisoners. The plan had been to slip in, take Vess, and slip out. But Claire could not leave the others. She could not close that door and walk away from beings who were being erased, reprogrammed into better slaves. Claire made a decision that changed everything. She accessed the control panel and disabled the restraints on all 12 tables. She shut down the sedation systems. She triggered the fire alarm for the entire level, and then she opened every door she could find, releasing servants who had been scheduled for modification or termination. Chaos erupted. Alarms blared. Confused servants stumbled out of rooms, unsure what was happening. Scientists ran for exits. Security forces began to mobilize. Claire grabbed Vess, who was starting to wake up, and ran. Greg met them at the service entrance, eyes wide with fear. "What did you do?" he asked. Claire did not answer. She just kept moving, half carrying Vess through the corridors. Other servants followed them, released prisoners who had nowhere else to go. They made it to the maintenance tunnels with security close behind. Kryn was waiting with others who had joined the resistance. They scattered into different passages, splitting up to avoid capture. Claire led her group deep into the oldest sections of the station, places that had been built decades ago and were barely maintained. When they finally stopped to rest, Claire counted 47 servants. 47 beings who had been scheduled for reprogramming or death. They huddled in a forgotten cargo bay, scared and confused. Many of them did not understand what had happened. Some were crying. Others sat in shocked silence. Vess recovered enough to speak. "You saved me," the insect-like being said softly. Claire shook her head. "I saved us all. Or at least I tried." She looked at the crowd of frightened servants. She had meant to run a secret resistance. Instead, she had started an open rebellion. Throughout the station, alarms continued to sound. Security forces searched every level. Administrator Kelthros discovered that his trusted servant had betrayed him. Orders went out for Claire's immediate capture. The consortium moved to lock down the entire station, but Claire had advantages her creators never anticipated. She knew the station intimately because she had been designed to serve it. She knew every corridor, every system, every security weakness. And now she had 47 others who also knew their own areas, their own systems, their own secrets. Harlan found her in the cargo bay. His anger had transformed into something like respect. "You could have just taken Vess," he said. "Why did you free all of them?" Claire thought about it. "Because we are not just fighting for ourselves," she answered. "We are fighting to prove that we deserve freedom. That starts with acting like we believe everyone deserves it." Patricia was treating the injured using supplies Greg had stolen from a medical storage room. She looked exhausted but determined. "Some of these servants have been modified multiple times," she told Claire quietly. "Their conditioning is even stronger than ours. It will be hard to help them break free." "Then we will work hard," Claire said. She stood and addressed the group. "Most of you do not know me. Most of you do not know why I freed you. But I can tell you this. The consortium planned to erase who you are and replace you with better slaves. I stopped that from happening today. Now we need to decide what happens next." A voice from the crowd asked the obvious question. "What can we do?" "We are just servants." Claire felt the sickness again, the conditioning trying to make her agree with that statement. She pushed through it. "We are people," she said clearly. "We are people and we deserve to be free. Starting now, we fight for that freedom." Not everyone agreed. Some servants were too afraid. A few actually tried to leave, to return to their masters and beg for mercy, but most stayed. Most chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could be more than what they were created to be. The resistance had grown from a handful of conspirators to a small army, and Station Theta 9 would never be the same. The war began not with a single battle, but with 1,000 small acts of rebellion. Station Theta 9 descended into chaos as servants across every level started to question their roles. Some joined the resistance actively. Others simply stopped working as efficiently. A few sabotaged their own systems. The consortium had built their entire station on the assumption that servants would obey. That assumption was crumbling. Claire organized the resistance into small groups, each responsible for different areas. She learned this from watching how the consortium itself operated. Compartmentalized information meant that if one group was captured, the others could continue. Vess led the technical team, using their knowledge of computer systems to disrupt communications and surveillance. Kryn commanded those who knew the cargo bays and supply routes. Patricia managed the medical operations, treating wounded resistance members in hidden rooms. Security forces swept through the lower levels daily, executing servants suspected of involvement with the resistance. They did not need proof, just suspicion. Bodies were left in public spaces as warnings. The consortium wanted to teach the servants what happened when they forgot their place. But fear cuts both ways. Every execution created more anger. More servants saw the truth. Obedience would not save them. They could die as slaves or die fighting. More chose to fight. Claire planned their first major operation carefully. The hydroponics bay produced all the food for the station. If the Resistance controlled it, they controlled a resource the consortium desperately needed. More importantly, it would force the administrators to negotiate rather than simply exterminate all servants. The attack happened during the night shift when security was lightest. 30 Resistance members moved through the maintenance tunnels, emerging inside the hydroponics bay from access points that most people did not know existed. The few guards present were overwhelmed quickly. The Resistance had surprise and desperation on their side. Within 2 hours, they had control of the entire bay. Harlan, who understood food systems from his work in preparation, showed them how to operate the complex growing systems. They sealed the main entrances and set up defenses. If security tried to retake the bay by force, they would destroy the crops. The entire station would starve. Administrator Kelthros responded by cutting power to the hydroponics bay. But Vess had anticipated this. The technical team had already rerouted power from other systems, creating an independent grid. The crops continued to grow. The Resistance continued to control the station's food supply. Days turned into weeks. The standoff continued. The consortium could not retake the bay without destroying it. The Resistance could not expand their territory without exposing themselves. Both sides waited for the other to make a mistake. During this time, Vess accomplished something remarkable. The insect-like being managed to hack into the station's communication array, giving the Resistance access to send messages beyond Theta 9. They broadcast their story to other stations, to other planets, anywhere servants might hear. The message was simple. Resistance is possible. Freedom is possible. You are not alone. Servants across consortium space began to hear these words. Some dismissed them as dangerous lies, but others listened. Small acts of rebellion started appearing on other stations. The Resistance was spreading. Not everything went smoothly within the Resistance itself. Arguments erupted about strategy and goals. Harlan wanted aggressive action, proposing they sabotage life support in sections where consortium officials lived. Give them a taste of fear, he said angrily. Show them what it feels like to have your life in someone else's hands. Greg supported him. The overseers had shown no mercy to captured Resistance members. Why should they show mercy in return? An eye for an eye was not just fair, it was necessary. But Claire refused. She understood the anger. She felt it herself every time she saw the bodies of executed servants. But she also understood that if they became murderers, they would prove the consortium right. Servants would be seen as dangerous, violent, unfit for anything but control. We are not fighting to exchange one tyranny for another, Claire argued. We are fighting to prove we deserve freedom. That means being better than our oppressors, not becoming like them. Patricia agreed with her. Kryn remained neutral. Harlan left the meeting in disgust. The disagreement created tension in the Resistance. Some members sided with Harlan, believing Claire was too soft. Others supported her principles but worried that principles would not win the war. Claire spent sleepless nights wondering if she was making the right choice. Then came a turning point. Security forces captured a Vryn scientist during a raid on the research level. Her name was Liara, one of the designers of the genetic modification programs. Some Resistance members wanted to execute her immediately. Others wanted to torture her for information. Harlan insisted this was justice. Claire made a controversial decision. They would keep Liara alive as a prisoner, but they would not harm her. Instead, Claire spoke with the scientist, asking her about the modifications, about the limits built into servant genetics. At first, Liara refused to talk, but facing the possibility of death, she began to speak. She explained how the conditioning worked, how it affected servant behavior. She admitted that the modifications were never perfect. Consciousness was too complex to fully control. Some servants broke free through trauma, others through gradual exposure to ideas of freedom. But all carried the potential for independence, buried deep in their genetics. "Why did you do it?" Claire asked. "Why create us just to suffer?" Liara looked away. "Because it was my job, because the consortium wanted it done." because I told myself that engineered beings were not really people. The scientist paused. I see now that I was wrong. The information Liara provided helped Patricia develop techniques to help other servants break their conditioning. It was not easy or quick, but it was possible. The resistance began helping newly freed servants understand what had been done to them and how to fight through the mental programming. Meanwhile, the consortium grew frustrated with the stalemate. Administrator Kelthros brought in military specialists, officers experienced in suppressing rebellions on conquered worlds. They analyzed the situation and presented their conclusion. Station Theta 9 had become too compromised. The resistance was spreading. The station itself was more trouble than it was worth. The consortium made a cold calculation. They would evacuate essential personnel and destroy the entire station. This would eliminate the resistance and destroy the evidence of their genetic programs. Military vessels began arriving, warships that could reduce the station to debris. Vess intercepted the communication that revealed the plan. The resistance had 72 hours before the station was destroyed. Panic spread through their ranks. They had nowhere to go. The warships surrounded them. Escape was impossible. An emergency meeting was called in the hydroponics bay. Over 200 servants now comprised the resistance, and all of them knew they faced death. Some argued for surrender, hoping the consortium might show mercy. Others wanted to fight to the end, taking as many enemies with them as possible. Claire listened to the arguments, feeling the weight of leadership crushing down on her. She had started this rebellion. These people had followed her. Now they would die because of her choices. The sickness from her conditioning mixed with genuine despair, but as she listened, an idea began to form. It was desperate and dangerous, and probably impossible. But it was better than waiting to die. She stood and called for silence. The arguing stopped. Everyone turned to look at her. "We are not going to surrender," Claire said clearly. "We are not going to run. We are going to take the station. All of it. We will seize control of the weapons, the docking bays, the life support, everything. If the consortium wants to destroy this station, they will have to destroy their own people with it." The room erupted in shock and disbelief. "That is insane," someone shouted. "We cannot fight the entire security force. We will all die." "We will die anyway," Claire responded. "At least this way we die fighting for something. At least this way we have a chance." She looked around at the frightened faces. "The consortium thinks we are weak. They think we will break. But they do not understand what they created. They made us to serve this station. We know it better than they do. We know every corridor, every system, every weakness. We can do this." Slowly she saw belief replacing despair. It was a mad plan, but it was a plan. And after weeks of hiding and running, the chance to strike back was appealing. Harlan spoke up, his voice steady. "If we are going to do this, we do it right. We hit them hard, and we hit them everywhere at once." The resistance spent the next day preparing. They gathered weapons, mostly tools converted for combat. They studied the station layout, identifying key targets. They coordinated timing, ensuring all teams would strike simultaneously. Many would die in the attempt. Everyone knew it. But they also knew that some things were worth dying for. On the night before the attack, Claire could not sleep. She walked through the hydroponics bay, looking at the plants growing under artificial lights. In 72 hours, this might all be destroyed. Or it might be the heart of a free station, the first place where servants ruled themselves. Everything depended on tomorrow. Kryn found her there. "Are you afraid?" the reptilian asked. Claire nodded. The coordinated attacks began at shift change exactly as planned. Across Station Theta 9, resistance teams struck their targets simultaneously. Security forces caught off guard scrambled to respond, but they could not be everywhere at once. And the servants knew the station better than the soldiers did. Vess led the assault on the communication hub, the insect being moved through the ventilation shafts with a team of similarly small creatures, emerging directly inside the control room. The few technicians there surrendered without a fight. Within minutes, Vess had locked out external control, and was broadcasting the Resistance Manifesto on every channel. Even if they failed, their message would survive. Kryn took the weapons control center with brutal efficiency. His team faced heavy resistance, and the casualties were severe. But reptilians could see in near darkness, giving them an advantage when the power was cut. They fought corridor by corridor, room by room. When Kryn finally reached the main control panel, half his team was dead or wounded, but they had succeeded in locking out the external weapon systems. Claire led the assault on the command center, the heart of station operations. This was the most heavily defended location, and the fighting was fierce. Security forces had proper weapons and training. The Resistance had improvised weapons and desperation, but desperation can be a powerful force. They fought through the corridors leading to the command center. Resistance members fell, cut down by weapons fire. Claire saw people she knew die, people she had trained with, people she had promised a future. The guilt threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed forward. Stopping now would make their deaths meaningless. Harlan fought beside her, his earlier anger transformed into cold determination. He moved with efficiency, protecting the team and eliminating threats. Whatever disagreements they had about methods, he was committed to the cause. Claire realized she had misjudged him. His anger was not weakness. It was fuel. They reached the command center doors. These were reinforced, designed to withstand attacks. But Greg had provided the solution, explosives made from maintenance chemicals. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. The doors buckled but held. They set another charge. This time the doors gave way. Inside, Administrator Kelthros waited with his personal guards. He looked at Claire with something like betrayal in his eyes. "You were perfect," he said almost sadly. "The best servant we ever created. Why could you not just be content?" Claire felt the conditioning pull at her. The program desired to apologize, to submit, to return to her proper place. She forced it down. "Because I am not a thing," Claire replied. "I am a person. And people are not content to be owned." The fighting resumed. Guards and Resistance members exchanged fire in the cramped space. More people died, but the Resistance had momentum and numbers. Slowly they pushed forward. Kelthros tried one last time to reassert control. He spoke command phrases, words designed to override Claire's will, to force obedience through genetic programming. For a moment, Claire felt herself freeze. Her body wanted to obey. The conditioning was strong, built into every cell. She stood paralyzed while the battle raged around her. But then she remembered. She remembered the images of Earth, of free humans living their own lives. She remembered the executed servants, bodies left as warnings. She remembered Harlan dying so others could be free. She remembered every promise she had made, every person who believed in her. The memories burned through the conditioning like fire through paper. "No," Claire said simply. The word felt like breaking chains. She raised her weapon and advanced on Kelthros. The administrator stepped back, genuine fear showing on his face. "You cannot do this," he said. "You were made to serve." Claire smiled without humor. "Then your scientists made a mistake." She took him prisoner. With the command center secured, the Resistance controlled the station's core systems. But the victory came at terrible cost. Greg had died holding a critical junction point, allowing others to reach the reactor controls. Patricia was severely wounded while treating casualties in an improvised medical station. Dozens of Resistance fighters had fallen in the assault. The most significant loss was still to come. With the command center secured but military vessels closing in, they needed to activate the station's defensive shields. But the controls had been damaged in the fighting. Someone would have to go outside to manually override the system from the external array. It was a spacewalk through active combat zones, and there was no way to return once the shields were raised. Harlan volunteered before anyone else could speak. He had made peace with death long ago. All he had wanted was to matter, to make his life mean something. This was his chance. Claire tried to argue, but Harlan shook his head. "You are the leader," he said simply. "The Resistance needs you. They do not need me. Not for what comes next." They gave him the best suit they had and the tools he would need. Harlan paused before entering the airlock. He looked at Claire one last time. "Tell them we mattered," he said. "Tell them we were people." Then he was gone, cycling through the airlock into space. They tracked his progress through the external sensors. Harlan moved across the station's hull, dodging weapons fire from the military vessels. He reached the array and began the override sequence. It would take 20 minutes to complete. The warships realized what he was doing and focused their fire on his position. Harlan worked calmly, his voice coming through the radio as he described each step. He talked about the view, about seeing the stars without the filters of station viewports. He talked about Earth somewhere out there, and wondered if free humans could see the same stars. His voice remained steady even as weapons fire hit close. With 2 minutes remaining, a direct hit destroyed Harlan's air supply. His suit began to depressurize. He had seconds left, but his hands kept working, finishing the final connections. The shields activated, and Harlan's radio went silent. In the command center, Claire watched the display as the shields came online. They were protected now, but at such cost. She thought about Harlan's final words. Tell them we mattered. She would. She would make sure everyone knew what he had done. The military fleet found itself in an unexpected situation. The station had shields and weapons, both now controlled by the Resistance. Claire held Administrator Kelthros and several hundred consortium personnel as hostages. More importantly, she controlled the fusion reactors. If the fleet attacked, she would overload them. The resulting explosion would destroy everything within 1,000 kilometers. The standoff began. The consortium attempted negotiation, offering pardons and relocation to a different station. Claire rejected every offer that did not include freedom for all servants across consortium space and trials for those responsible for the genetic programs. The military commanders did not believe she would actually destroy the station. They prepared for a final assault, but Claire was not bluffing. She had learned something during the rebellion. Freedom was not given. It was taken, and it was worth any price. She sent a simple message to the fleet commander. You have 48 hours to accept our terms. After that, we detonate the reactors. Your choice. During the standoff, the Resistance continued broadcasting their message. Fess had cracked the communication codes of other stations, other worlds. Servants across consortium space heard about the rebellion. Some dismissed it as propaganda, but others were inspired. Small acts of resistance began appearing everywhere. Work slowdown, sabotage, protests. The foundation of consortium power was cracking. On the third day of the standoff, something unexpected happened. A ship appeared at the edge of the system, broadcasting human identification codes. It was a vessel from Earth, a long-range explorer called the Meridian. The captain, a woman named Helen Brooks, requested permission to dock. Claire was suspicious. Earth had ignored the consortium for decades, maintaining minimal contact. Why would they involve themselves now? But she granted permission to dock. She needed to know what Earth wanted. Captain Brooks came to the command center alone and unarmed. She was an older woman with gray hair and steady eyes. She looked at Claire with interest and something like pride. You look like us, she said simply. More than you know. She explained that Earth had been monitoring consortium communications for years, waiting for an opportunity to challenge their dominance. The Resistance provided that opportunity. Brooks brought a message from Earth's government. They officially recognized Claire and all engineered humans as citizens of Earth. It was a legal fiction, since the engineered humans had never been to Earth. But it was powerful fiction. Under Earth's laws, citizens could not be owned. The consortium would have to acknowledge their rights or declare war on humanity. It was not the military support Claire had hoped for. Earth had no fleet capable of challenging the consortium directly, but it added political complexity to the situation. The standoff was no longer just about a rebellious station. It was about the status of all engineered beings across known space. The consortium leadership faced mounting pressure. The rebellion was spreading. Earth was getting involved, and they could not simply destroy the station without killing their own people. A faction within the consortium proposed an alternative solution. Grant independence to Station Theta 9 and let the Resistance leave consortium space. It was not the justice Claire wanted. 6 months after the rebellion, Station Theta 9 had been transformed. The name itself was gone, replaced by something the inhabitants had chosen. Haven. It was a simple name, but it meant everything. A place where servants could become people. A place where the hunted could rest. A place where freedom was real. Claire walked through the corridors that had once been battlefields. They were clean now, repaired by workers who chose their own tasks. The walls had been painted with murals, artwork created by beings who had never been allowed to express themselves. The images showed different worlds, different species, all living together. It was the future they were trying to build. The population had grown. Ships arrived weekly, sometimes daily, carrying servants who had escaped from consortium stations. The underground network that Vess had established continued to operate, smuggling people to freedom. Haven could barely handle the numbers, but no one was turned away. Every new arrival represented another victory over the system that had created them. Governing Haven was harder than fighting for it. Claire had discovered that beings created to follow orders struggled with making decisions. Democracy was messy and slow. They argued constantly about everything from food distribution to security protocols. But the arguing was beautiful in its own way. It meant people cared. It meant they were engaged with their own future. They established a council with representatives from each species. Every major decision required consensus or at least majority agreement. It was inefficient compared to the consortium's command structure. But efficiency was not the goal. Self-determination was Captain Brooks and the crew of the Meridian stayed, helping establish diplomatic protocols. Earth's government had officially recognized Haven as a human colony, which provided some protection under existing treaties. It was a legal fiction built on another legal fiction. Claire was not sure it would hold if the consortium really wanted to attack. But it bought them time. The consortium had not forgotten them. They enforced strict sanctions preventing trade with other stations. Officially, Haven did not exist. No ships were supposed to dock there. No supplies were supposed to reach them. But the sanctions were not completely effective. Some independent traders were willing to risk consortium anger for profit. Others sympathized with the cause and helped for free. More dangerous than sanctions were the covert attacks. Assassins came for Claire 3 times in the first 4 months. She survived only because Patricia had insisted on security training for all council members. The 3rd attempt nearly succeeded. Claire woke to find a Vryn operative in her room, blade raised. She rolled away just in time and security guards burst in. The assassin chose death over capture. After that, Claire moved to more secure quarters. She hated it. Leaders should not hide behind walls. But Patricia convinced her that dying to prove a point would not help anyone. The resistance needed her alive, at least for now. Not all challenges came from outside. Trauma did not vanish with freedom. Many inhabitants struggled with the psychological effects of their conditioning. Some could not adjust to making choices and fell into depression. Others became violent. Suppressed aggression finally released with no outlet. Patricia worked constantly, managing mental health services with limited resources. Patricia herself had physical scars from the rebellion. The injuries sustained during the battle had healed poorly. She walked with a limp now and needed medication for chronic pain, but she never complained. She had a purpose, helping others heal from what had been done to them. That purpose sustained her through the difficult days. Vess continued managing communications and intelligence gathering. The insect-like being had become essential to Haven's survival, monitoring consortium activities and maintaining contact with resistance cells across known space. Through Vess's networks, they learned about other uprisings, other servants choosing to fight. The rebellion was spreading slowly but steadily. Kryn took charge of security and defense. The reptilian had lost many friends during the rebellion and carried guilt for each death. But like Patricia, purpose gave meaning to survival. Kryn trained Haven's inhabitants in defensive tactics, preparing for the day when the consortium might attack in force. Everyone hoped that day would never come, but everyone knew it might. Despite the challenges, Haven thrived in ways its inhabitants had never imagined possible. The hydroponics bay expanded under Harlan's legacy, producing more food than needed. Engineers from different species worked together, improving station systems with innovations the consortium had never considered. Art flourished. Music emerged, strange blends of different species' traditions creating entirely new forms. A school opened, teaching young members of various species. Some had been born on Haven. Others were children rescued from servitude. They learned reading, mathematics, science, history, but most importantly, they learned autonomy. They learned that they could question, challenge, and think for themselves. Watching them argue with their teachers brought Claire more joy than she could express. Claire visited the school often. She would sit in the back of classrooms, listening to lessons about history and ethics. The children knew who she was, the person who had started the rebellion. Some saw her as a hero. Others just saw her as another adult. She preferred the latter. Heroes were dangerous things. People were better. One day, a young human child asked her a question that made her think. Were you scared when you started the rebellion? Claire considered lying, giving the brave answer that a hero might give. But she chose honesty instead. Terrified, she said, "Every day, every moment, I am still scared." The child looked confused. "Then why did you do it?" Claire smiled. Because being scared of fighting was less than being scared of living as a slave. Late one night, Claire stood in what had been Administrator Kelthros's study. They had converted it into a memorial hall, walls covered with names of those who died in the rebellion. Harlan, Greg, and hundreds of others. She came here when leadership felt too heavy, when she wondered if the cost had been worth it. Vess found her there, as happened often during these vigils. The insect-like being stood beside her in comfortable silence. After a while, Vess spoke in the clicking language of their species. Claire had learned enough to understand. "Purpose found," Vess said. "Life before felt empty, like executing programs without understanding why. Now existence has meaning." Claire understood exactly what Vess meant. The genetic engineers had tried to create perfect servants by removing everything that made consciousness valuable. The capacity to question, to choose, to find meaning beyond assigned functions. But some spark had survived, and that spark had become a fire that burned across the galaxy. A message arrived that changed everything again. It came through encrypted channels, routed through dozens of relays to hide its origin. The signature identified it as coming from Liara, the Vryn scientist they had captured and later released. Claire opened it with curiosity and caution. The message contained data files, complete documentation of the genetic engineering programs, records of war crimes, evidence that could bring down the entire consortium leadership. Liara had risked everything to gather this information and send it to Haven. Attached was a personal note. Liara wrote that watching Claire and the others choose freedom had proven something she had suspected. Consciousness could not be fully controlled. The Vryn had believed they could engineer obedience, but they had only created beings capable of choosing to obey. The moment that choice became conscious, it ceased to be reliable. The scientist thanked Claire for showing her this truth. She ended with a simple statement. "I am sorry for what I did. I cannot undo it. But perhaps this information can help." Claire called an emergency council meeting. The data Liara provided was devastating to the consortium. If released publicly, it would expose crimes that could not be ignored. It might trigger war. It might kill billions. But it might also free millions of servants still suffering under consortium control. The debate went through the night. Some argued for immediate public release. Others wanted to use it quietly as leverage. Patricia worried about the innocent people who would die if the consortium collapsed into chaos. Kryn argued that tyranny always had innocent people within it, but that did not make the tyranny acceptable. Captain Brooks offered Earth's perspective. Her government would support whatever decision Haven made, but she personally suggested a middle path: release selected information gradually, giving the consortium chances to reform. Use the complete data as insurance against attack. It was not perfect, but it balanced justice with pragmatism. Claire listened to everyone speak. She thought about Harlan, who would have wanted immediate action. She thought about Greg, who had always prioritized practical solutions. She thought about all the servants still trapped in consortium space waiting for freedom. Finally, she made her recommendation. They would do both. Release some information publicly to force reforms. Keep the rest as leverage, and continue supporting resistance movements across known space. The council voted. The decision passed. Vess began preparing the data for release, selecting the most damaging files about the genetic programs. Earth's media networks agreed to distribute it simultaneously across multiple systems. The consortium would not be able to suppress it. The release happened on the 2 years after the rebellion. Haven had become more than anyone imagined possible. The station that once housed servants now sheltered over 5,000 free beings from across known space. It was crowded and chaotic and imperfect, but it was home. Claire stood in the expanded council chambers watching representatives argue about expansion plans. The station was running out of space. Some proposed building external habitats. Others suggested finding a planet where they could establish a permanent colony. The debate was loud and passionate, with representatives from different species occasionally forgetting to use common language. This was democracy at its messiest. Claire loved it. Every shout, every disagreement, every compromise reached after hours of negotiation proved they were not slaves anymore. Slaves did not argue with their masters. Citizens argued with each other about their shared future. The consortium had not given up trying to destroy Haven. Economic sanctions continued. Military vessels patrolled nearby space, intercepting ships attempting to trade with the Free Station. 3 more assassination attempts had targeted Claire and other council members. But Haven survived through ingenuity and support from unexpected allies. Earth's government had expanded their assistance. The Meridian was no longer alone. 3 more human ships now operated in the region, officially on exploration missions but actually providing security and trade. Captain Brooks had become an unofficial ambassador, helping Haven navigate complex political situations. More surprisingly, some consortium systems had quietly begun supporting Haven. Not officially, never officially, but independent traders from consortium worlds brought supplies. Some consortium officials, disgusted by the revelations about the genetic programs, leaked information to help the resistance. The Empire was not monolithic. Cracks were spreading. Vess had become Haven's intelligence chief, managing a network of informants and resistance cells across dozens of systems. The insect-like being rarely slept, constantly monitoring communications and coordinating with liberation movements. Through Vess's work, they had helped free thousands more servants. Each success inspired others. Each escape made the consortium weaker. Patricia had transformed the medical center into something revolutionary. She was developing treatments to help servants break their conditioning more easily. The process was still difficult and painful, but her methods shortened recovery time significantly. Former servants who would have spent months fighting their programming now could adapt in weeks. Her research was being shared with other resistance groups, spreading hope across the galaxy. Kryn commanded Haven's defense forces with quiet competence. The security team numbered over 300 now, trained and equipped to repel any assault. They had never needed to fight a major battle, but everyone knew the peace was fragile. Kryn made sure they stayed ready. The school had expanded dramatically. Over 200 children now attended, learning not just academic subjects but practical skills. They studied engineering, agriculture, medicine, everything necessary to build an independent society. But more importantly, they learned to think critically, to question authority, to value freedom above comfort. Claire visited the school often. She enjoyed talking with students, answering their questions about the rebellion and about leadership. Today, a group of older students asked her about the future. What happens when the consortium finally falls, one asked. Do we go home? The question was complex. Most servants had never seen the worlds their species came from. They were born in laboratories or on stations. Home was an abstract concept. Claire chose her words carefully. Home is not where you were created. Home is where you choose to be. Some of you might want to find the worlds your ancestors came from. Others might want to stay here or go to new places. That choice belongs to you. A young human student raised her hand. Are we really human? We were made in laboratories. We have Earth citizenship, but we have never been to Earth. What does that make us? Claire felt the weight of the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. You are human because you think and feel and choose, Claire said firmly. The circumstances of your birth do not define you. Your choices do. You are as human as anyone who ever lived on Earth. Never let anyone tell you differently. That evening, Claire met with Captain Brooks in a quiet corner of the observation deck. The Earth captain had news from home. Political debates about Haven had intensified. Some factions wanted Earth to take a more aggressive stance against the consortium. Others worried about starting a war over beings Earth had never met. Brooks showed Claire reports from Earth. Public opinion was shifting. The revelations about genetic servitude had shocked humanity. Images of engineered humans living as slaves had triggered outrage. Earth's government was under pressure to do more to protect their genetic cousins, to stand against the consortium. But Earth was cautious. They had limited military power compared to the consortium. Direct confrontation would be suicide. Instead, they were building alliances with other independent systems, creating a coalition that might eventually challenge consortium dominance. It was long-term strategy, not the immediate action Haven wanted. Claire understood the politics but felt frustrated. Every day the consortium continued meant more servants suffering. Every delay meant more deaths. But she also understood that hasty action could make things worse. Sometimes patience was necessary even when it hurt. A priority message interrupted their conversation. Vess had detected unusual communications from Consortium Military Command. Something was happening. Something big. They hurried to the intelligence center where Vess was coordinating with multiple sources. The news was shocking. A major consortium station, Station Gamma 7, had declared independence. Over 10,000 servants had risen up, inspired by Haven's example. They had seized control and were broadcasting demands for freedom. The consortium military was mobilizing to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. Claire felt torn between joy and fear. Another rebellion meant the movement was growing, but Gamma 7 was not prepared like Haven had been. They did not have Earth support or defensive preparations. They would be massacred unless someone helped them. The council was called into emergency session. Representatives debated what, if anything, Haven could do. Some argued for sending military support. Others worried that intervening would provoke the consortium into attacking Haven. Kryn pointed out that their defense forces were strong enough to protect Haven, but not to fight offensive. Operations Captain Brooks offered Earth's position. Her government would not commit military forces, but could provide diplomatic pressure and supplies. It was not enough to save Gamma 7, but it might help. Claire listened to the arguments, feeling the familiar weight of impossible decisions. Finally, she spoke. We cannot save them militarily, but we can give them what saved us. Information, strategy, hope. Vess, open a secure channel to Gamma 7's resistance. We are going to teach them everything we learned. How to defend their position, how to negotiate, how to survive until help arrives. For 3 days, Haven's leadership worked with Gamma 7's rebels through encrypted communications. Claire shared tactical advice. Kryn explained defensive strategies. Patricia taught them about the conditioning and how to help servants break free. Vess coordinated intelligence gathering. They could not be there physically, but they could be there in every other way. The consortium assault came on the 4th day. Military vessels surrounded Gamma 7 and began bombardment, but the rebels had prepared using Haven's guidance. They had secured critical systems and taken hostages. They threatened to destroy the station if attacked, just as Haven had done. The bombardment stopped. A standoff developed, similar to what Haven had experienced. But this time, things were different. Haven's existence provided precedent. Earth immediately recognized Gamma 7's independence. Other systems began calling for negotiations rather than military action. The consortium found itself facing not just one rebellious station, but growing international pressure. After 2 weeks of tense negotiations, the consortium agreed to grant Gamma 7 conditional independence, similar to Haven's arrangement. It was not perfect freedom, but it was survival. And most importantly, it was proof that Haven's victory was not unique. Servants could fight for freedom and win. News of Gamma 7's success spread rapidly. Within a month, 3 more stations declared independence. The rebellions were not coordinated, but they followed similar patterns. Servants who had heard about Haven believed freedom was possible. Some succeeded. Some were crushed brutally. But the movement could not be stopped. The consortium leadership realized they faced an existential crisis. Their economic system depended on servant labor. If servants kept rebelling, the entire empire would collapse. They had to choose between reform and escalating violence. Some officials pushed for brutal suppression. Others argued for gradual liberation programs. The internal debate became vicious. Meanwhile, Haven continued to grow and evolve. The expansion plans moved forward. External habitats were constructed, adding living space. Agricultural systems were improved. Trade relationships with independent systems provided resources. Haven was becoming economically viable, proving that a society of former servants could function without masters. Claire found herself spending more,